New book review. Hello bookworms, and they're here again, and today we have another book review. We're gonna embark into The Color of Magic by Terry Pratchett. But before we do that, don't forget, subscribe, like the content, and comment anything you want to comment right away. And yeah, let's jump into it. So The Color of Magic is the first book of the Discworld ever published. It was published in 1983, and of course, because it has been published for a long time, it has many ratings. This book has over 383,000 ratings, and it averages on a score of exactly 4 stars out of 5. You know the gist. I'm gonna go through the synopsis first. If you don't want to hear anything about this book that has been published 40 years ago, then skip to the timestamp. Otherwise, just stick around and I'll read it for you. On a world supported on the back of a giant turtle, sex unknown, a gleeful, explosive, wickedly eccentric expedition sets out. There's an avaricious but inept wizard, a naive tourist whose luggage moves on hundreds of dear little legs, dragons who only exist if you believe in them, and of course, the edge of the planet. Now, before I jump into the categories, I'm not going to put in the scores I gave to other Terry Pratchett books that I've read because they really belong to another series, even though they are within the Discworld, and so I don't feel like they should even be compared. But if you're curious, the thumbnails are these. You can click on the notes up above and go watch those videos and then come back if you feel like it. Now jumping into our first category, which is the plot. Our story follows Rincewind, who is a failed wizard, and Flower, a naive, very optimistic tourist into the Discworld. And we watch them navigate through the world, going from misfortune or misadventure to the next, almost like a collection of short episodes. And we take them from Ankh-Morpork to the edge of this world. We see many different places. I think the plot, even though it's funny comedic and it has a lot of twists and turns, it feels very episodic, and sometimes it meanders into the chaotic or just a bit too absurd even for me. And the fact that it feels like almost several episodes of these two adventures going from place X to place Y, then to place Z, then it might have a lack of that cohesiveness that we see, for example, in the Death series. However, of course, Terry Pratchett does an amazing job at creating things and plot twists, which still makes the narrative be unpredictable. Like I said, in comparison with the Death series, I feel like this book, The Color of Magic, is a primal state of Terry Pratchett. It's not yet fully refined, and it gave me a lot of resemblances to Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where it's also very absurd, not as witty as the Death series becomes, but still very chaotic and just a lot of absurd random things happening. I think both styles have their charms and their cons, but I think I prefer the second one. Not to say that the first one is bad, The Color of Magic, it's still quite good, and that's why for the plot I'm still giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. Now let's talk about characters. Like I said, we follow Rincewind and Flower. These are two main protagonists. They're funny in their own ways. I feel like I enjoyed Flower a bit more because as a tourist that is just navigating the Discworld for the first time, we can associate ourselves with Flower and incorporate ourselves into being that tourist that is just marveled at everything that is around them. However, I felt like they weren't really fully fleshed out characters. They were more just conduits to explore the world, or conduits for the comedic timing or the comedic episodes. And yeah, it seemed like their struggles weren't really big struggles. And of course, we have supporting characters. They are also funny. They do not seem to give me the same impact as that series later on in Terry Pratchett's career, but they were still remarkable, like the luggage. You can always remember the luggage when you think about this book because it's so absurd and still quite important to the story. So, with all this said, I'm going to give this category a 4 out of 5, and still because I do think that Flower and Rincewind are good characters, despite them not feeling fully fleshed out. I still think that they fulfill the objective they were meant to fulfill, if that makes sense. Now, I think the crown jewel of The Color of Magic is really the world building. Just to think about the Discworld as a flat disc on top of 4 elephants who themselves are on top of a great turtle swimming through space is just the idea is crazy and funny, but then we get to actually explore the Discworld, that disc, and figure out how it works and what is there and what things exist and what doesn't. and all of those are just filled with marvel, awe, and at the same time absurdity. It's a good mix. And because in the Dead series we don't explore the Discworld as much, I feel like I enjoyed this part of the book, especially because I got to do that. I got to explore the Discworld and also just see what else is there. And of course, there's also the fact that we see characters that we are familiar already, like Death, and so we can start making those connections between the different series within the same universe. I think the only small criticism that I'm going to make regarding the world building is that some parts felt too absurd, in the sense that in the Dead series, the absurd parts about the world still had a logical explanation, or not really logical because it doesn't make sense most of the times, but I could keep my suspension of disbelief in and believe that things were like this. Whereas in The Color of Magic, some of them were quite jarring, and therefore it broke that suspension of disbelief sometimes. Because of that, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5, but just this close to 5. Now let's explore the writing style of Terry Pratchett's. And I think we can clearly see a difference between The Color of Magic Pratchett and the Death series Pratchett, because the Death series, the writing is matured, it has a lot more wit, the type of humor is slightly different. It's still within the absurd, but I felt like it was a smarter absurd compared to The Color of Magic. Not to say that The Color of Magic isn't good in terms of writing style, it's still good, it's still absurd, it still has that Terry Pratchett magic in it. But then again, in regards to the writing itself, the pacing, I felt like the pacing wasn't quite right. The transitions between these different places that we were visiting was quite abrupt, in the sense that we were done with this place, suddenly we're moving to the next one, and that carries on to the feeling of feeling episodic. So there's that to balance with, which I didn't really enjoy per se, and I prefer a more cohesive thing. And then again, I can bring up again the fact that this book felt a lot like Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, in the sense that the absurd is more chaotic, more nonsensical compared to Terry Pratchett's absurd later on, where it feels still absurd but more smart, witty, whatever you want to call it. So because of that, I'm going to give writing style a 3 out of 5, and it's mostly because it doesn't align as well with what I like about Terry Pratchett, and as you can see in the other reviews, I really enjoy Terry Pratchett's writing style. It's just this one wasn't really for me. Last but not least is enjoyment, and The Color of Magic is filled with a lot of joy and fun comedic times. However, again, this is highly subjective. The type of humor that it was in this book wasn't aligning perfectly with me, and so that was driving a bit my enjoyment to not reading this book and reading it. And again, because of the episodic nature of the book, where we have these disjointed adventures, I wasn't also really enjoying that. There were a couple of things that mixed together lowered my enjoyment of this book, and it took me a bit longer to read than I expected, but still I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5, considering that I still enjoyed knowing about the world and seeing the other characters that exist in the other series, but yeah, there's this balance that keeps me between the 2 and the 4, and so it goes to a 3. So as we tally up the scores of The Color of Magic, you can see that this book, even though not as good as some of the ones I've read before, it's still quite a good book. It's still on the positive score, and it definitely laid the groundwork for Terry Pratchett's Discworld. You can see that this was where it started, and everything else came from this. And I still enjoyed reading this book because now I have a sense of how Terry Pratchett evolved as a writer and how he changed the way his writing became. Comparing this book with the Death series, I don't know how it changes if we go and read another series like The Witches or Guards, City Watch is the name of the series. So I'm still keen to read more books. I definitely want to read the continuation of this one, which is called The Light Fantastic, I think. But yeah, it's still interesting to see how an author evolves in his writing and progresses with the universe that they created. So in conclusion, The Color of Magic receives a 4 for plot, a 4 for characters, a 4 for world building, and then a 3 for writing style and enjoyment, which gives us a 3.6 out of 5. It's a bit low compared to the Goodreads score, but I mean, on Goodreads I would rate this a 4, so it's accurate in some sense. But let's hope that from now onwards, this was the lowest and now it's just going up, up, and up. And I want to know, what are your thoughts on The Color of Magic? Have you read this book? What do you think about it? Do you think the categories are different for you in terms of what did you score them? And yeah, let me know. If you're writing any spoilers, don't forget, just write spoilers before you actually spoil someone. And yeah, I want to know more. Let me know, and don't forget to subscribe, like the content, and I'll be seeing you soon, alright? Beijos!